Hi guys, good day to all of you. So lesson 1 on the chapter 25. So now today we're going to do on these macroeconomic aims of government. Okay, so now before we go into the lesson, I would like to give you some idea about what we mean by macroeconomics or macroeconomic. So macroeconomic means the broader view or how a national economy works. It's a study about how a national economic works. Okay, so all this while we didn't do on the macro part. What we did is all this while we were doing on the microeconomics. Microeconomics means very little, a microscopic view of an economy, very tiny little things on in an economy. For example, a person's income, an individual behavior, basic economic problem, fundamental economic problem, and a company's profit, company's revenue, and all that. Okay, this is what we did. So now we're going to go into a different set of problems. Okay, different set of problems, meaning to say it's no more basic economic problem. There is no more scarcity, scarce resources, and all that. Now it is fully on the macro problems. Macro problems, meaning to say like inflation, unemployment, low economic growth, like we got the deficit imbalance of payments and all that. So these are the four main problem, or maybe sometimes you can see the lower productivity, widening gap between rich and poor. Okay, so all these are macroeconomic problems. Okay, so now before we go into the macroeconomic problems, macroeconomic aims of government and all that, so firstly I would like to introduce to you about two important concepts in macroeconomics. Okay, which is number one is on the aggregate demand, the other one is the aggregate supply. So these two components, aggregate demand and aggregate supply, is really important for you to know, for you to understand the problems. Okay, what problems? Macroeconomic problems later on. Alright, so now aggregate demand, aggregate supply is nothing new. It's the same thing as what you have done earlier. Meaning to say that in the section 2, demand and supply. So demand, law of demand, downward sloping curve from left to right, and then when price increases, the quantity demand decreases. When price decreases, the quantity demand increases. The same thing, but now it is no more micro level. Now it is a macro level, is a total level or aggregate level. Another name for total is aggregate, right? So similarly, for the supply part, is no more a company's supply, is a country's supply, a country's production ability and all that. So for this lesson, okay, we are just based on my notes. You need to go into the chapter yet from the textbook. You don't read the textbook yet. So let me introduce to you the basic concepts of the macroeconomics, mainly on the aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Hope you will get very crystal clear idea about the AD and AS. In short, we call it as the aggregate demand. We use the term AD for aggregate demand, and AS for the aggregate supply. So instruction. You should be students are required to do the following, which is read, watch, and do. So read these notes, watch my video presentation, and do up all the exercises given in these notes here. So learning objectives, by the end of this lesson you should be able to describe three important economic variables. Okay, three important economic variables which measure the economic performance of a country. Okay, last time we measured a company's performance, okay, or maybe an individual's performance. Now we are going to measure a country's performance, an economic performance of a country, of an economy. So firstly, you should know the three important indicators or three important variables. Next, you should be able to identify, or you should be able to recognize the ADAS analysis, aggregate demand, aggregate supply analysis. That's the main thing. By understanding the ADAS framework, you will be able to identify the equilibrium level of price and the national output. The last part, you should be able to explain or analyze sometimes the effects of the changes in the AD. So when AD increases or AD decreases, so what will happen to the economy? Okay, what are the consequences towards the economy? So these are the things that you have to know. So let me introduce the topic as we discussed earlier. So the first thing is what macroeconomics is a study about or study of how a national economy works, how a country works. Okay, another term for a country, we can say a national economy. How it works? It works based. It can be measured based on the three important variables or indicators. The first thing is the national income or output. Okay, so here or sometimes economists used to use the term called GDP, real GDP. So real GDP, national income, national output is all the same. For now, you just stick to this idea, is all the same. I repeat, real GDP or GDP, national income or output. A country's income is measured based on number of goods and total number of goods and services produced in a year within the country. Okay, I repeat, a country's income, okay, it has been measured using the total number of goods and services, okay, produced by a country within a year. So that's why it's important for you. That's why they used to use these two different terms, national income or output. First thing, that's the first indicator, or sometimes is a real GDP. GDP means gross domestic production. Okay, number of units produced in a country, number of units of goods and services produced in a country within a year. Next, the level of employment, how many number of people working in a country, and the general price level. General price level meaning to say prices of goods and services in a country. Okay, are they expensive or inexpensive? Right? Okay, so these are three important indicators that you must memorize. All right. Next, for example, highly performing economy or highly performing country will be experiencing three things, which is number one is the high level of employment. Now, a lot of people are working. Number of people working in a country will be higher. All right, higher level of employment. The first thing. Second thing, higher level of national income or output. So logically, if you see more people working, more production taking place. All right. Number three, lower level of general prices. When the supply increases, the price goes down, drop. So it is always healthy for an economy to have high level of employment. All right, high level of national income or output, more production, so that they can keep the prices of goods and services low. All right. Therefore, what a country will do is, in order to produce more national output or to increase the national income of a country, companies in a country have to hire what? More workers. They have to create what? They have to employ more workers by creating more job opportunities. So as more jobs are created, as more people are working, what will happen is people will be enjoying a higher level of what? National income. So the meaning to say, people can enjoy more goods and services. People will have the money. As you work, you earn. As you earn, you spend, you save. Alright? So you can enjoy a better living standard, a better lifestyle. So conversely, falling general price level will make the cost of living also decline. So as more people in a country are working and producing, if the country able to produce more goods and services, people can enjoy more products, people can enjoy more income, and the country can keep the prices of goods and services lower. All right, and this decreases the living cost or cost of living, raising the country's performance, making what? The society much better off. Okay, making the society much better off, meaning to say an increase in the standards of living. Okay, this will what? Increase the standards of living, meaning to say people will have what? Better lifestyle or living standards. On the other hand, a decline, whereas if there is a production slowdown or a decline in production of a national output, meaning to say if a country unable to produce like last time, or maybe now the country is producing lower, will lead a fall in the employment. For example, if let's say companies are shutting down, not operating, closing down, lockdown and all that, what will happen is that not many people are working. As not many people are working, so no production. So lack of production or production slowdown will cause higher demand for goods and services, and this will increase the prices of goods and services, or in other words, cut in the supply. When the production there's a decline in the production, will reduce the supply of goods and services, as the supply of goods and services is lower than the demand for goods and services. Therefore, what will happen? There will be a shortage of goods and services. When there is a shortage, the price will increase. Prices of goods and services, the aggregate level, the country level, prices of goods and services, all the goods and services may go up or hike. So a rise in the general price level tend to raise the cost of living. So when the prices of goods and services started to hike or increase, so this will increase the cost of living, reduces the purchasing power. Purchasing power means buying power, your buying ability. Okay, because reduction in the real value of money. Okay, I'll come to that later. Okay, drop in the real value of money means I'll come to that later. But for now, you just remember, okay, it will reduce the purchasing power. Meaning to say, okay, when the prices of goods and services increase or products become more expensive, what will happen to your buying ability? Last time you can buy 10 units, now you can only buy less than 10 units. So your purchasing power drops. Hence, in rising price level in a country can make the society to what? Worse off. Worse off meaning to say it will reduce the standards of living, alright, or it will decrease you cannot have a better lifestyle, in other words. Okay, so let's take a look at the summary here, given here. So look at the summary over here. So economic variables, high economic performance, it's a comparison between a high economic performance and low economic performance. So if you look at here, how we compare using the three important indicators or the three important variables, which are national income, output, or GDP per se. Secondly, the number of workers working in a country or the level of employment. Second important indicator. The third important indicator is the general price level. So for a country to have high economic performance, they must maintain high national income or output, or increase in Y. The symbol for national income or output is what? Is Y. We can use Y income. Okay, they must increase the Y. At the same time, they must also increase the N. The symbol for level of employment or number of workers working in a country, okay, is what? Is N. We use what? The term N or the symbol N. So for high economic performance country must maintain an increase in what? In N, and also must keep the prices of goods and services low. Therefore, if you look at the high economic performance, what? Decrease in the P means price, general price level. Whereas if you take a look at the lower economic performance, okay, the national income will decrease, the level of employment will decrease, at the same time the prices of goods and services will increase, or the general price level will be higher. So let's move into the aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So in the introductory section, we outline economic performance measured in terms of what? Three things: the national output, employment, and price. Okay. At the macro level, the interaction between aggregate demand, as I mentioned earlier, AD and AS, determines the national income, employment, and general price level. So coming back to the AD-AS story, or AD-AS framework, or AD-AS analysis. Okay, so we're going to use the tool of aggregate demand and aggregate supply to determine the national income, the employment level, and price level. So what is aggregate demand? Aggregate demand means very simple, very easy to understand. Please just use back the same idea of demand that you have learned earlier. Same demand, but now it is at the total. We are talking about total demand in a country. Okay, how can we define an aggregate demand? Aggregate demand means the total demand of what? Various types of goods and services that arises from the economic sector. Look at the word. Please zoom into the term economic sector. So economic sector, we got what? We got four types of economic sectors. The first sector is the consumer. Second sector is what? Producer. The third sector will be the government or the public sector. The fourth sector is what? External sector, import and export, international relations. All right, so four important sectors that you must be very clear about. Number one is the consumers, followed by the producers. Thirdly is the public sector. Lastly will be the external sector, or a better term. Okay, the better description for the economic sector will be household. Okay, firms, government or the public sector or state sector, followed by the external sector. Four sectors. All right, so at a certain price over the given period of time. So again, I repeat, aggregate demand is defined as the total demand of various types of what? Goods and services that arises from consumers, producers, government, as well as the external sector at each price and time. So that's how you can easily define it. So next, if you look at here, in line with the law of demand, as I mentioned earlier, the AD curve shows what? An inverse relationship or a negative relationship between the general price level and also level of national income or output. So in the simple demand, you probably would have learned y-axis represented by the price, x-axis is represented by the quantity. But when we talk about the aggregate demand, the y-axis or the vertical axis represented by the general price level. Earlier in the concept of concept of simple demand or basic demand or law of demand, what we do is price of a particular product. Okay, that means y-axis is represented by a price of a particular product. But here in this case, it is the general price level. That means all the prices of goods and services will be represented by the y-axis or the vertical axis, whereas the x-axis or the horizontal axis is represented by the total number of output produced in a country, or the national income, or the GDP. Okay, I repeat, the x-axis is represented by the number of units, total number of goods and services produced in a country. Okay, so national income is often described a term called gross domestic product or the GDP, as I mentioned earlier. So if you take a look at the table here, so this table is to illustrate an aggregate demand. So we take a look at the table here. The points are point A, point B, and point C. So how can we derive? Okay, this table is to show you how can we derive an aggregate demand. So by using the general price level, the coordinates here, the coordinates, or in maths you probably have learned the coordinates, the x coordinate and the y coordinates. The same thing here, since the price is representing the y and national income or GDP representing the x. So point A, for point A, the coordinate will be 300 and comma 10 is a coordinate. So by plotting these 3 points here, A, B, and C, we can derive your aggregate demand curve like this. Okay, so if we plot above values into graph, we will get a downward sloping AD as shown below. Why we call it downward sloping is because, okay, it's going down from your left to right, or it is negatively sloped, or there's an inverse relationship between the price level and also the national income. So when you want to draw either a demand curve or an aggregate demand, or supply or an aggregate supply, you must start from your left to right. Why we have to start from the left to right? Because we want to follow a clockwise. We always follow a clockwise. Or another reason why from left to right is because of the number line. So if you look at the number line, the x-axis number line is starting from 0, and the number or the values gets larger as you go towards the right from your left to right. Alright, so if you look at the demand curve, is what is going downward. It's going downward from your left to right. That's why we say it's a downward sloping curve, or a negatively sloped curve. A negatively sloped curve which shows an inverse relationship between the price and the national output or national income, or quantities here, number of units produced in a country, total number of units produced in a country. So this is an exercise for you. By looking at the diagram, please fill in the blanks with the right answer. So next concept is the aggregate supply. So aggregates, the concept or the idea of the aggregate supply is the same as the simple supply, but here we're talking about the supply of the entire country. Okay, so we can define by just knowing the idea of supply of the total supply of a country. We can easily define the aggregate supply by saying the amount of goods, the total amount of goods and services the firms are willing to offer, or all the producers and sellers are willing to sell at a certain price level at over a period of time, or at each price and time. These firms are generally willing to sell more output at higher price level. Is coming back to it is in line with the law of supply. It's coming back to the law of supply, where when the price increases, the quantity supplied will increase. There's a positive relationship between price and the quantity supply. Similarly, here sellers, they're willing to sell at the higher price. They're not willing to sell more at the lower price. So by looking at the table, this table here, there are 3 points D, B, and F. By plotting these 3 points in a graph, you can derive your supply curve. So so this is an exercise for you. By looking at the table, you can fill in the blanks. So a supply curve is an upward sloping curve from left to right. It's an upward sloping curve from your left to right. So it is following exactly the same as your simple supply that you have studied in section 2. So let's move on with the ADAS analysis or ADAS framework, a simple equilibrium framework this is also similar to what you have learned in market equilibrium or price determination. It's the same thing. So what do you mean by ADAS analysis? Is the interaction between the aggregate demand and aggregate supply, which determine the equilibrium price. Now it is no more the equilibrium price of a particular product. Now it is more on the equilibrium price of the equilibrium level of the general price in a country, and also the national income or the output or the real GDP. So the equilibrium level of a country is established when the AS is equal to AD, or the other way around, when the AD is equal to the AS. Okay, when the aggregate demand is equal to the aggregate supply at a particular price level. So by looking at this table, we can say the AD is 200. We can start from the 200. So if you look at the AD 200, AS is also 200. Therefore, the equilibrium price level, okay, will be $20, or maybe $20 billion, $20, and the national output is what? Is 200 billion. I repeat. So you see the equilibrium point or the ADA, the equilibrium price can be identified. Okay, it can be identified when the AD is equals to AS, when the AD curve cuts the AS curve. Therefore, we can identify the equilibrium price, general price level. Therefore, in this case, the equilibrium general price level is $20 when the national output is 200 billion. So this can be shown using a graphical analysis by looking at the graphical analysis by plotting out the table. Okay, we can get a simple it is something similar to the market equilibrium. So you can see the AD cuts the AS at the point E. At that particular point, the price is what? $10, and the national output is what? Is 200. So in other words, when we talk about the ADAS analysis or ADAS framework, so this is what you must recall or remember. Okay, it is very easy. It is the same thing as a simple demand and supply that you have studied in your section 2. Okay, next part is the effects of changes in AD in the economy. So from the equilibrium or maybe from the ADAS analysis, what will be the impact? Okay, what will be the impact if demand shift? Okay, when the demand shift to the right. Okay, shifters effect. When the AD, here in this case is aggregate demand. When the AD shifts to the right, what will be the impact? The impact is the same thing as what you have studied. Okay, when the AD or the demand rises, the price rises. As the price rises, the output also rises. So in this case, when the AD shift from maybe we can start from the initial equilibrium point. If you take a look at this diagram, the initial equilibrium point at what? E0, when the AD0 cuts the AS. Right? So when the AD0 cuts the AS, the initial equilibrium point is E0. Right? Okay, the initial price level, initial general price level is P0, and the national output what? At Y0. When the aggregate demand curve shift to the right from AD0 to AD1, new equilibrium point established at E2. Point E2 when the AD2 cuts the AS. There's no changes. AS remain constant, whereas the changing or the changes is only happening in the aggregate demand. So at E2, the new price level is what? Is P1, and new output level is what? Y1. So what are the what impact we can see here is the first impact here is that the general price level has increased from P0 to P1, and the national output also has increased from Y0 to Y1. So this is how we can report, or this is how we can identify the impact of changes in the AD towards the economy. So this will be the explanation. The initial level, at the initial level, the equilibrium of the economy is established at point E0 when the AD0 is equal to AS, or we can say when the original aggregate demand curve cuts the aggregate supply. Okay, at that particular point, or at that equilibrium, or at that particular point, we can say the output is what? Y0, and the price is what? P0. The general price level at what? P0, and Y output was at the Y0. When the aggregate demand curve shift to the right from AD0 to AD1, we can see that there is a new equilibrium point established at what? E1. Therefore, a new price at P1 and new national output at Y1. The impact is what? There's an increase in the general price level. There's an increase in the national income. That will be the impact. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. See you on lesson 2.